Good day, everyone. Welcome to CX Excellence Chats with Anjali, the podcast that's all about transforming your business through the power of customer experience. I'm your host, a growth and customer strategy consultant with a passion for discovering brand and human relationships. In each episode of this podcast, we dive into a critical component of strategy that can potentially make a huge difference in your business evolution. But it's always and always powered with a customer lens. So the theme for today is around design thinking and innovation as tools to ideate and solve for business problems. Most challenges around business growth or stagnation arise from problems in the area of customer acquisition, retention, experience with regard to products, sales, service, or some part of that relationship. Business owners and managers often face challenges and struggle to find solutions to address these challenges when they're caught in a web of activities that have perpetuated over years. It just becomes a habit of being. In such a situation, it's a good thing to switch off from the flurry of activity and get into what we call a design thinking mode for solutioning. Today, we shall discuss how design thinking and innovation techniques can offer ways to solve problems. To apply any such technique, the first and foremost prerequisite is to operate from a customer-centric approach. What we call in our parlance, drop the manufacturer thinking and wear the customer hat. Because only in such a space can novel ideas emerge. That may be difficult to find otherwise. Therefore, potentially lead to create fresh solutions. So that's just kind of setting the background before I invite the guest in. Who we have today is Ravi Kant. He's a design thinking and solutions expert, the founder of Innovation Spark Asia. He holds 30 years overall experience across brands like Polaris, NatWest Group, and he's held roles like the head of solutions and technology. He holds a specialization in design thinking from the University of Virginia, Darden School of Business, and his complete passion is in transforming businesses through customer-centric strategies. So with that, I welcome Ravi. Hi.
Hi, Anjali. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me into your podcast. I'm looking forward to have engaging discussions with you today.
Absolutely. So happy to have you here as well. So first off, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey thus far. And also tell us what is your current passion and purpose, and that keeps you motivated as a catalyst for innovation.
Yeah. So thank you, Anjali. So I basically come from IT background, and if I break my 30 years corporate and consulting journey into three parts, the first part would say decade, I spent as an individual contributor, as a coder. So I used to write code and doing the coding, doing the testing, implementing. During that period, most of my experience largely has been banking domain. And I have seen how digitization has started in Indian banks, especially State Bank of India, Indian Overseas Bank, Punjab and Sindh Bank, and so on. So when I started, banks were operating totally on manual systems, so manual ledgers. So at that point of time, if you go to a bank, you have to stand in a queue. And in that queue, your account number between 1,000 to 2,000, you have to stand in one queue. Account number 2,001, 3,000 in another queue, and so on. So that's the way banks used to operate. And when I started my journey, I had the opportunity to digitize some of these manual processes into the automated processes. I remember 3 years sitting alongside with customers, understanding their processes, observing them what they are doing, and then developing application, testing with them, and implementing. And at that point of time, Dr. Manmohan Singh used to be the finance minister, and he inaugurated the branch where we implemented the total branch automation. So that's the first 10 years. So next 10 years are largely as a team leader, project manager, program manager, where I led teams across locations, across geographies. And while I was in our Polaris, I was given the responsibility to develop the mutual fund system for Citibank Singapore. And I was the project manager. I used to travel between Singapore and India, understanding their needs and the requirements, coming back to India, get it developed from here, going back again, demonstrating that, and then taking their feedback and making those changes and implement that system over a period of time. So it was implemented in Singapore initially, and that later on it got implemented to 9 other countries in the Asian regions and so on. So that's another achievement during that period. So I was doing the team management, program management, alongside the overall relationship management with the clients such as Citibank, Standard Chartered Bank, as well as I had the responsibility for P&L as well. So that's the second part. And the third part of the journey is, I would say, at the leadership level, where I was leading teams across geographies. And I used to have close to 1,000 people at one point of time when I was leading the retail transformation program based out of India for the NatWest Group. I also led some of the initiatives such as vendor consolidation program, where we had multiple vendors from whom we have taken resources to help us in delivering some of the IT programs in the NatWest Group. So I led that program to bring in transitioning some of the roles from the small scale vendors to large vendors such as Infosys and TCS and so on. I also led some of the, I would say, organization level initiative where I had to literally redesign the organizational structures from the operating model perspective, sitting in India, working alongside with CIOs, CXOs based in US, UK, and other places and so on. So that's largely at the adding value at the organization level. So individual contributor to team lead, project manager, P&L management, and the transformation at the organization level. My journey in the corporate and consulting was working with Polaris Software and later on with NatWest Group. Now coming back to my current journey and what I'm currently working on. So I got introduced to design thinking in 2016 when I was given the responsibility to build the culture of innovation and setting up innovation lab. And when I learned about design thinking, I can tell you, I fell in love with it.
Okay.
And since then, I have been practicing this while I was in RBS, building the culture of innovation, setting up innovation lab, building the environment where people are coming up with lots of ideas, and how do we translate those ideas into something tangible, which can integrate with our mainstream systems and so on. That's the learning I had in RBS while working from 2016 to 18. And end of 2018, I started my own design thinking and innovation consulting firm, which is Innovation Spark Asia. And in last, I would say, 5 years or 6 years time frame, I would have done more than 200 workshops, and more than 5,000 people would have attended my programs and so on. And I worked with large corporates such as HSBC, ICICI, Bajaj Allianz, and then there are certain clients in the Asia region like Sun Life, Grepa, and so on. So there are clients across industries, be it in the banking and financial domain or in the healthcare domain and so on. So I'm really passionate and I'm enjoying this journey. I call this my journey. Second inning of my journey is Ravi Kant 2.0. And that's totally different from what I have done in my first journey, which was more IT focused. Right now, it is more business and transformation focused, helping organizations and teams to be innovative so that you can stay relevant. And
Great. So thank you for that introduction. Gives us a very good sense of, how you kind of traveled this distance from the early stages of digital transformation, but somewhere design thinking caught your fancy. So for the benefit of our listeners, tell us, what is design thinking and why is it called human-centric design?
Yeah. Okay. At high level, design thinking is a problem-solving approach. And it focuses on understanding people and their needs. So we spend time with our users by observing them, by listening to them. And based on that insight, we gather a lot of information about their behavior, their needs, their challenges. And that's where we gain deeper understanding so that we can empathize with them better. The first stage is understanding users. The second stage is defining their problems. So based on their understanding, based on our observation, listening to them, we define their problems. And some of the problems, even users don't know about their problems. So these are hidden, unarticulated problems. Once we have understood our users, defined their problem, next is creating innovative solutions for them and test those solutions in an iterative manner with a feedback mechanism. And at the end, you come up with a solution which resonates 100% with the needs and the expectations of your user. And empathy is the key throughout this process. So at high levels, it's a process which we follow, and there are many frameworks available. One is from Stanford University. We call it as 5 hexagon framework. And then the one which I practice is the double diamond approach from UK Council, and that's where I have my expertise and so on. So these are some of the frameworks which I have been using and so on. I hope this gives you at high level what is design thinking. Yeah.
I think the listeners would get a good sense at a very high level what it means, but let's go deeper.
Yeah, so give me one sec, because I haven't talked about human-centric design. Yeah. So throughout that design thinking process, people are at the center of the process. And we start with understanding people. And at the end, we deliver solutions with an iterative manner, with doing testing in an iterative fashion, taking their feedback and input. We end the process with people. So people are at the center of the process, and they are the pioneer, and they have been involved throughout this journey, understanding their problems through their solutions. Hence, that is why it is called a human-centric design, because people are at the core. And by applying these principles of design thinking or human-centered approach, organizations can come up with new products, new services, improve their processes, which really resonate with the human needs and the expectations rather than based on assumptions. So that is why it is called human-centric design.
Wonderful. I think that's very well explained. But let's go a little bit, deeper into thinking from a customer's perspective, or thinking as a customer, or understanding customers. It is that ability, I think, is still very rare, because in organizations, businesses, people, they continue to be immersed in product process thinking a lot from what we call the manufacturer side. We tend to see things more from this side of the stream than from the other side. And that's what CX is all about. How do we really change that thinking and start looking outside in rather than inside out, right? But tell us how design thinking has been instrumental in getting teams to become more customer-centric, because it is about human-centric design. Usually the moment you talk to people in corporates, in businesses, when they're caught in something, even if it is a problem that they're solving, the moment you talk to them, they immediately start coming up with solutions. Hey, let's do this, let's do this, let's do that. And it's ideation, but at a very base level, without probably even exploring what could be the dimensions of the problem and how do we see it from an outside-in perspective. So talk to us a little bit about that. How do people become consumer-oriented in the process?
Yeah. I think one of the first thing which I tell people and organizations, whenever you are solving any business problem, what are the first thing you have to ask? What are my user needs, or who are my users and what are their needs? And I have seen organizations have been designed to solve a stated problem, and they look at things from their products and services, and they start with questions such as, how can we develop XYZ, or how can we leverage this technology to improve our product and services? And you rightly said, it's a inside out view. And I emphasize organizations to start with questions such as, who is my customer? Who is our customer? What are their needs? And how does my solution is going to address their needs? So it brings and change the mindset to look at things from your customer and user perspective. And this is how, based on that mindset change and shift from looking at things from customer perspective, it gives you a space to define problems from their perspective and solve it accordingly. The other thing which I also emphasize, as you rightly said, people jump to solutions very quickly. And the framework is as such, which enforces people to step back and look at problems first before you jump into solutions. So in the double diamond approach, when we use, so there are 2 diamonds. One diamond is for the problem space, and the other diamond is for the solution space. And we enforce organizations to spend amount of time in the problem space. As a human being, as an organization, we want to get away from problems as quickly as possible. You have to love problems. If you love problems, understand problems better, it gives you more possibility to solve problems in a more innovative way, more creative way, because you have understood the problem correctly. And then you apply that understanding and create solutions which will 100% resonate with the needs and the expectations of it. And that's how I drive human-centric approach to bring in the customer thinking in the decision making with respect to your product, your services, your processes. And that is why it is called human-centric process, human-centric design.
Right. So, we've also practiced this McKinsey approach to problem solving, which says that when you're problem solving, spend 95% of your time describing the problem. And obviously there is a framework, 3x3 sort of framework, which you go deeper into explaining every aspect of the problem and spend maximum of your time just doing that. Because once you've gone through the throes of that, usually the solution automatically emerges is easier than trying the other way around. So that's what you're saying, in a sense, ditch the solution mindset and love the problem, as you said. It's very well said. Yeah. So, when you say empathy for the customer, one thing is saying, just think and feel like the customer. It sounds simplistic. It's probably not that simple because it's not always easy to put on that hat and look at it otherwise. So you may or may not be used to it, right? Also, so in that process, obviously, we'd be listening to customers, observing them, as you said, talk to them, observe them, listen to them. But do you also use research in that process to therefore become empathetic to, their issues and needs?
Yeah.
And how does that marry? So that's part of the process that dramatically built into the process, right?
Yeah. Very good question, Anjali. And research is the cornerstone of the design thinking process. And that's the first stage of the design thinking process. And we do follow the research in order to gain deeper understanding of our people for whom we are designing this solution so that we can empathize with them better. And there are two kinds of research we normally follow. And I have seen organizations follow some level of research. Any problem you're trying to solve at the business level, some level of research definitely is required. And we start with a secondary research. Secondary research is all about what is available with you with respect to the existing data, with respect to your users, with respect to problems, with respect to trends or the industry data. So we start with analyzing that data. It gives us a broad understanding of context and the problem. That's the first part of the research stage. So the other research which you do is the primary research, or we call it as user research. That is where we go and spend time with our users in observing them in the real world environment, listening to them and see what they are doing, how they are doing, and why they are doing. This is where we understand about their behavior, their attitude, their motivations, their pain points, their challenges. And once we have understood their behavior, their pain point, their challenges, that gives us a liberty to put ourselves into their shoes and look at things from their perspective. Look at things like what they see, what they do, what they say, and what they hear. And that's the position from where we can see problems from their perspective as if these are our own problems.
Right.
And that's how we build empathy with our users.
I would say a lot of times people feel that design thinking is about a few people getting together in a room and, going through this process. But actually, that isn't it. Unless you've gone and done some primary or user research, it really isn't complete.
Yeah. And I always talk about sitting in a boardroom. You cannot solve real problems. You cannot understand what my users are looking at and what are their needs. And most of the time, sitting in boardroom, we decide, we know what our user needs, and we start creating solutions. And one of the steps which is missed I have seen in the corporate world is going out and talking to people. We do all the solutioning based on secondary research. Primary research, or user research, which is missing. And that's I would say, the time thread which brings the empathy into the whole process. And that is where the customer centricity comes into play.
I agree. I agree. So, we have to leave the assumptions and go with
Yes.
real truth. So, where you listen to them and you actually understand the real pain point. And I think customers ask, like, what's in it for me? And unless you crack that, the solution may or may not be a right fit, right? So, let's move on and say, this can be applied to various, processes or product design and so on, or even about services and how that are being delivered. So journey enhancements, for instance, and so on. In your experience, since you've done so many workshops, where have you seen the maximum impact, like in product or in service, or do you think it works equally well everywhere?
Yeah, yeah. Of course, design thinking when started off, it was used for developing new products, and that's the starting point. But over a period of time, organizations have used it for designing new services, creating new processes, or improving their processes.
Right.
And I have seen with my experience more, I would say, outcomes I have seen in the service or the customer experience perspective.
Sure.
So in my workshops or my consulting assignments, I always tell people to start with customer experience and technology will follow.
Of course.
We start with creating the journey map
Mm,
to understand what are the various steps
yeah.
my users are going through when they are interacting with my brand,
Mm,
when they're interacting with my product or services. And that's where we get a deeper understanding of how they are getting their goals achieved through our product or services or our processes. And how do they feel?
so give us a real example. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah. Let's.
I can share with you in the banking or the healthcare domain.
Right.
In the healthcare domain, we start with looking at things from patient's experience perspective. So when a patient is visiting a hospital, before even visiting the hospital, they have to book an appointment.
Mm,
They have to call up the hospital help desk to get an appointment. How has been their experience at that stage? Then when they come into the hospital and they are entering into the hospital, the parking area and other things, how do they feel when they are entering into this? What do they think? They get into the hospital and at the reception counter, how they have been treated,
mm,
how they have been listened, how do they have been given help to navigate, to go and meet the doctors, how the doctor is really able to spend time and listening to them, how that doctor is able to understand their problem. And then at the billing counter, how do they make the payment and then exit. So we draw the journey of a patient in an hospital, starting with even before coming to hospital and ending with meeting doctors and getting the prescription and then finally getting the medicine if at all. So we draw that complete experience and then we look at which are the points where the experience is giving some frictions, where
mm,
the experience is not giving the positive sense to our customers.
right.
So where the emotions are low, we always look at things from the emotions perspective and we identify which are the areas or the touch points where the emotions are low. And those are the areas which we need to improve so that we can give them seamless, frictionless, enjoyable journey when they are visiting hospital, for example. And same is true
So, which
for
would
in the
mean,
banking.
in this particular example, this would mean not just looking at the process, the sequence of various things, but it could even mean real physical changes, like moving
Yes.
the help desk from this place to that place would probably help customers better.
Yeah.
So, and people are actually using this to actually design physical spaces, processes, structures, technologies, apps, everything, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where, like, when we have identified those low touch points or where the emotions are low, then we get deeper into that to get more deeper understanding from customer perspective. And that is where we go and observe, talk to our customers, talk to those patients, understanding what they are really looking at. What are their expectations and needs when they are coming at that touch point? And those inputs are being considered to create those innovative solutions. It could be changing the environment. It could be creating some posters around it to give them the feeling and so on. It all depends upon what are they feeling and thinking at that point of time, at that touch point. And then we create solutions accordingly.
So, it's suffice to say that this would lead to a lot of innovative thinking, right? Because novel solutions, because you're thinking out of the box and saying, what can we do different, right? To make it easier, better for our customers so that they are happier, at every step of the way with transacting with the brand in whatever category you may be. So therefore, let's talk a little bit about this word, innovation, because design thinking itself does lead to innovation. And innovation is a little bit like crystal gazing. You're predicting the future. You don't know where you will arrive at, right? It is tough. And yet it is very important to remain relevant to customers, because customers' needs are changing, their thoughts, expectations, everything's are changing. And therefore, for businesses to constantly remain in touch with them and continue to serve them, it's important to continue to innovate, right? Now, in your understanding, as you work with organizations all these years, how can this kind of systemic innovation thinking be created with business inside businesses to keep in touch with the customer changing needs or wants?
Yeah. Uh, First and the foremost thing, I would say, innovation is not about predicting the future. It is about creating the future. So you have to start with that framework and the mindset. That's one part. Second is, innovation is not about having a great idea or great product. It is all about how you are adding value to a customer. Even a small change can create a value for users, is good enough as a part of innovation. Because at the end of the day, uh, we are providing solutions to our customer and clients. Their needs keep on changing. If you are able to understand the changing needs, and a small solution, small incremental change can create value for them, I call it as an innovation. There is a confusion. Innovation is all about big products and so on. It is not. Innovation is all about how do you create value for your customer incrementally, which shifts the needle from left to right, slowly even, that's fine. Now, what I have observed when I'm working with organizations, the innovation is not a one-time activity. Yeah. And it is a constant process which has to be part of the DNA of the organization. And it has to be integrated in your day-to-day processes. There are organizations who it is a part of, like PepsiCo is one company I know. Innovation, design thinking is in their DNA. DBS, a bank in Singapore, it is as a part of anything they do, it goes to that. The design thinking is integrated into their process. Airbnb is another company which was almost verge of closure. Now it's a multi-billion-dollar organization, and it is a part and parcel of their processes. Anything they come up with, they follow design thinking approach, looking at things from customer perspective, creating the prototype, test those prototypes in an iterative manner before it is launched and integrated with the mainstream systems and so on. So these are some of the ways that it has to be integrated. If you ask me, like, what are the top 3 things which will help to bring in that level of systemic approach where innovation is continuously coming, one-time activity, but it's a part and parcel of the organization. So 3 things I always talk about when organizations have to build that innovation ability or capability in an organization. One definitely is the culture of curiosity. Yeah, that's where people should be asking more and more whys and asking more and more what if. So that creates an environment where you're always looking for continuous improvement. You're always challenging the status quo and looking at what if anything were possible to create more value for my users. A culture of curiosity to start with. The second thing which I talk about is the customer-centric decision making. Okay. Real insights comes from observing, listening, right? Understanding their needs. So anything and everything you're doing, you have to start with customer centricity.
Yeah.
So look at things from, as we already talked about, outside in view. So you have to have processes in place where you are continuously engaging with your customers and getting regular input feedback to understand their changing needs. And then you improve your product, services, and so on. Emirates is one of the airlines, and they have integrated it very well. So they collect data about customers on a regular basis. And every 6 months, they come together and synthesize that information to see what is working well, what is not working well. What are the preferences and the needs of my customer changing, and how we can use that understanding to improve our offerings and so on. So that's I have seen. So 2 things. So one is culture of curiosity, customer-centric decision making. And third, which is very important, is the empowered experimentation, creating the safe space for people to try out new things.
Yeah.
Even it fails. Fail fast, learn fast are two additional principles of design thinking. And it is all about making sure people don't shy away from trying out new things.
Yeah.
Even it fails, it's okay. So I think these are the three things which I always talk about organizations to focus on if you have to make sure that innovation is part and parcel of your day-to-day.
I think very rightfully said, building this culture of innovation is a lot about allowing people to fail. In a lot of places, failing is a stigma, and people feel like they will be punished if they fail. And so they are scared of taking chances. Now, in environments like that, it's very difficult to innovate. So in one of my earlier corporate avatars, we ran this whole program of saying, experiment, innovate, and it's okay to fail, but fail fast, of course, and don't make the same mistake twice. But
yeah, absolutely.
Unless we, encourage people to take chances, to take risks, to do things different and get them out of their shell, it is difficult to create this systemic belief of saying something new is possible. And it does, as you said rightly, it's not about doing new and novel things all the time. It's about doing all things differently.
Yeah.
Incremental, like disruptive innovation maybe comes once in a while, right?
Right. Yeah.
An Airbnb or an Uber is not born every day. But I think little incremental changes in products and services and, journeys can have far-reaching impact actually on the way people interact with as a company. So I think that's a very big difference for people to understand that I don't have to do crazy big things.
Yeah.
But those little small things actually go a long way. And how do we support people to do that? I think that's amazing. You talked about Airbnb, and I actually was reading about them. And there's a very interesting story that I came across. It said that it started by making only $200 a week.
Yeah.
And after some observations, the founders recognized that the advertising pictures that the hosts were posting online were not of sufficiently good quality. And
quality. Yeah.
And they use a design thinking approach to determine, why the existing customers, audiences were not utilizing those services or were not accepted by them.
Yeah.
They spent time to travel to every location and look for the solution, which is they actually installed cameras and took high quality pictures of every small thing. For instance, instead of showing one room, they would show every room.
Yeah.
There's a hot tub, a pool, whatever little things, and they started highlighting them. And as all of that came to life, the result was after they made these changes in a week, the revenue kind of tripled. And of course, we know that it's never looked back and gone far ahead. But it's true that, like you said, they've perpetuated this culture of looking minutely at things. I think the God that they say lies in details.
Yes. And I did read, they didn't wait for anything big. They hired cameras themselves and started taking good quality pictures and started posting it. Like, you really don't have to wait for a lot of things to happen and then you will start. You have to take those actions very quickly. And that's, again, the bias towards actions is one of the principles of design thinking. Don't wait. Whatever comes to your mind, try it out. Even if it fails, it's fine. It's fine. Don't wait for big things to come together.
Yeah. So one of the things that a lot of people are doing now is building digital journeys, apps, websites. How is design thinking being deployed in creating, consumer interfaces? UX is all about that, right? It's the science of understanding that, and therefore making sure that step is definitely invested in before you move to design. A lot of people just simply say, "Kya chahiye batao," and then, just design. Leave out that critical step of understanding that what is really the steps that are required to do that build before it design.
Yeah. So if I look at it in the UI or UX space, and if you apply design thinking in real sense, is understanding your user behavior, understanding their pain points, and learn from their experiences and the motivation and their motivation. If you know these things, then when you are designing the interfaces, those will be highly intuitive and aligning to their experience and expectation. So if you have not understood their behavior, for example, let's say I'm doing the observation for a customer who is using my product, which is a online product. When I'm observing them, I need to understand when they are using my product, what are the various steps they go through,
Right.
what they are thinking and feeling, where are the frictions, why they are not, why they have chosen this step rather than other steps. So at some stage, I'm giving multiple options and they chose X against Y. I need to know, understand why X and why not Y. And if I'm able to understand that, I can create the interfaces which resonate, align with their expectations.
Right. And
For that, you have to.
personalization. Isn't personalization part of
It is a personalization is also a
because
part.
you also have different personas, and actually,
Yes.
journey could be different for different people based upon who they are and what they want.
Absolutely. And without observing them, without understanding their behavior, without understanding their pain points, learning from experiences, you will not be able to come to that position.
Right.
So whenever I suggest, whenever you are doing UI, UX, sometimes people say UI, UX is all about what look and feel is all about. Of course, look and feel is important, but it is a journey. You have to give a frictionless journey to your users. Even it is look and feel is great, but it is not resonating with the journey which my users are expecting or the experience they are expecting. It is of no use. The adoption will be very low, or people will throw away that product.
Yeah. So since you have come from a technology background, I'm sure you've done a lot of these, processes of build. Let's talk a little bit about this whole process of agile building, which is what you call ideation, learning, pivoting and then rebuilding and so on. We hinted towards it right at the start, what you call agile. But design thinking is all about that, right? It's not linear. You go
it is.
back and it's not a linear process. So
yeah.
how does it help in learning? And tell us that through an example instead of, just talking about.
Yeah. Design thinking is an iterative approach. And what I have seen in organizations have started combining design thinking, Lean Six Sigma, and Agile together to create end-to-end innovation process and taking the best practices of all these three approaches. Design thinking is largely used to understand customer and their problem. Identifying the right problem to solve is where design thinking is good at. Some of the principles of Lean Six Sigma of experimenting, testing those in an iterative manner as a part of our prototyping and testing. And then when you have to deliver your solutions in an iterative manner and scale it up, that's where Agile comes into play.
Sure.
And organizations have integrated that. So if I look at, I can share with you an example of in a banking domain, and we were doing some work in the mortgage space. We started with understanding the changing needs of our customer in the mortgage space. And we did a lot of research and observed them in the real world environment. We were able to identify the right problem to solve. And we were able to identify problem which was there in the current mortgage process. Then we created the prototype to create solutions around it or create a smaller solution around it. And we apply the Lean principle to test those initially within our team to get their buy-in and test it within our team. Then we test it with our users, some of our users in an iterative manner. The solution is refined. So iterative manner, we did lots of iterations before the solution is refined and it reached to a stage where we can say now we can integrate in the mainstream system.
So just to help understand, when you revamp that mortgage process, what was the real business, the impact of the business? Sure. It is a well-known fact that a happy customer, A, comes back and uses you more, B, he talks positively about it and creates word of mouth. And that leads to a good ripple effect, advocacy. Whereas one unhappy customer, if there is friction in the process and we've not identified and it continues for a long time, actually an unhappy customer talks to more number of people than a happy customer does and spreads the bad news faster. And that leads to a downward spiral for the business, which obviously doesn't augur well for revenue for attention. So I think any investment in customer experience can only and only be accretive and add to both what top line and bottom line eventually. So having said that, I think an investment into understanding them, using the principles of design thinking, and then continuing to improve these journeys, I think is a great investment for anyone to make. So I think it's a great point we've come up to, and I think we're also nearing the end. So thanks so much, Ravi ji. It's been a very exciting conversation and important area, and very important for businesses, irrespective of which category you are, B2B, B2C, whatever business. I think this applies universally. And one of the things that we all say all the time is that change is the only constant. And in this ever changing world of newer customers and newer needs, newer solutions and improved solutions are always required. So therefore, we cannot undermine the importance of investing in design thinking approach, building a culture of innovation, and encouraging people to, challenge assumptions and think outside the box. And by considering the user's perspectives, business can only create more intuitive designs that increase customer experience across the journey lifecycle, and that will lead to upsides in all business KPIs. I think that's a great uptick. So thank you so much for that. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining in today on this episode of CX Excellence with your host Anjali. We hope you enjoyed this conversation and found some new stimulus which will help you reflect on your role in and build customer-centric thinking as you build solutions for your own customers in your business context, wherever you may be. Remember, the success of your business depends a lot on CX design working positively for you. So until the next month, keep mastering the art of CX. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please do subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. Thank you so much, and goodbye.